Hello everyone, this is Grace. It is July the 12th, 2025, and we are continuing our study on the word Niger in the Bible. So, let's go ahead and reread our original scripture. Now there were in the church that was at Antioch certain prophets and teachers, as Barnabas and Simon that was called Niger, and Lucius at Cyrene, and Manaen, which had been brought up with Herod and the Tetrarch and Saul. So this is telling us more about where the people lived, where they were brought up, in the nation that they were brought up in. In this particular case, Paul, or whoever wrote Acts, seemed to believe that we should be able to identify where Barnabas and Simon were raised just based on this nickname Niger alone. And we had deducted that the word Niger is a Latin word. It comes from the root word ni, and the er on the end means to. It turns it into a verb. That's what the er at the end of the word does. It turns it into a verb. To approach is what it means. To approach. Or I didn't do enough research, you guys. I don't know. To be closer. One of the two. But the root word is nigh. So this word is what was applied to the priests that lived at the temple of God. They were called Niger because they lived at the temple near God, and they would approach the altar. So, and we learned also elsewhere that he was a Levite, that Barnabas was a Levite. However, he was not at Cyprus. I don't think I pointed it out enough, but Barnabas was complimented throughout the Bible, unsolicited compliments for him. Just here and there. They say we did all of this for the church. They gave him a nickname for being so kind. I may have skipped a scripture or two, but at least twice he's complimented, and it's completely unsolicited. However, all the work that he's complimented for is done in Jerusalem because, of course, he was in Jerusalem. Another thing I failed to point out was that when he was sent to Antioch, he was sent to Antioch from the church in Jerusalem. He was not sent. This is before Acts 13. I think it's Acts 10 or Acts 11. It says he was at Jerusalem, and Jerusalem sent him out to do work at another location. I don't know if I put that in there or not. I kind of threw this together, but it is in here, and if you just read back 2 or 3 chapters, you'll see it, where he was at Jerusalem, and the church in Jerusalem sent him out to do work elsewhere. So he was at the church in Jerusalem, and he was an heir of Aaron, and that's why he was called a Niger. So when we left off, I mentioned to you also that Jesus was not born in Nazareth. Nobody really cared about the locations of people like that except for Paul. Paul, throughout his writings, he mentions the locations, the cities of where people were. He mentions the nations sometimes as well, but mostly the cities. And the fact that the Bible over and over and over says Jesus of Nazareth, as though that meant something to anyone, it's just nonsensical. What it is you take the word nigh and you put the er here to change it. But if you change it to something else, then it has a different meaning. Another thing that is very odd is that why, which I thought was very odd even before, is why would you, if you know the language, why would you put a suffix after the name of a city? That doesn't make any sense. Hold on, before we look this up, let's look at how the name was translated into Greek. Actually, before we do that, I'm sorry, a little out of order here. Just quickly, though. Quickly, Jesus was born in Sepphoris. Right here. Well, not born there. But this is where he was raised, Sepphoris. And they just added this on here in order to deceive you. But this is the most likely place that he was born from what my understanding. But yeah, this is not born, raised. This is where he was from, Sepphoris. Okay, so now we'll look at the chart. So we have Niger. And we'll just go down the alphabet. So A, B, C, D, E, F, and G is translated to a Z. So instead of N-I-G, it's going to be N-I-Z. And as far as the I is here. It skips this letter here. But that has an E sound. So it would be Ni. And what apparently... I didn't work on this too much either. I'm sorry about this. This is all stuff I had to do yesterday or the day before, 1 or 2 days. Days kind of, I put this together fairly quickly. Since it's Nazareth, it has an S sound. Nazar. So it changed it to an A. Nazar. So now we're gonna, and hold on. No, I think the next chart shows the same thing. I don't think we need to look at this. Yeah, it shows the G is changed to a Z. The I changes the sound to an as in machine. Vowel as in machine changes it to an E, but it's not E. It's the N word, or so they tell us. I'm starting to question that actually, or as in yes, A, but that's not what they want. That's not what we want. We want I, and the I. Or the where is it? The let me zoom out. Oh, it has aha, the silent. Okay, let's just look at the other one. So here's the or I don't want to say the word neger. So let's just say neger, and I'll just leave it at that. But it's not the E sound. That's why the I couldn't be transferred over, because it has a different sound. This I has an E sound. E. It would have been knee. So he changed it to an A. Now let's look at the extensions. So let's type in, we'll look at F first. ETH. So, no, you know what? Let's look at E first. For Nazarene. E-N. Nazarene. Because it says Paul was of the sect of the Nazarene. That's something we're going to look at in a moment. En is not stressed. Ethylene. A suffix. Excuse me, by the way. Denoting an inhabitant, a Nazarene, chemistry. Anyway, he's an inhabitant of a group. I thought I found more than that. Maybe I did, but maybe not in here. Okay, that's all we have for Een. Nazarene. So let's look up Nazareth. Suffix, also the or just th would have been fine. Forms the third person singular of verbs. He giveth. Also he doeth would be is one that's in here somewhere, I think. Here, doeth. Basically, when you put the F at the end of Nazar, it's saying that he is the person that allows you to draw closer to God, because the word means to draw nigh to God, right? So he is the one that doeth it. He is the person that causes you to draw closer to God. So you can put it like that, but in simple language, of course, we're just going to say he is the Messiah, because we know that the Messiah is the link between us and God. So that's what they're calling him, basically. They're calling him the link between us and God whenever they would say Jesus of Nazareth. That's how they were introducing him in the Bible. They weren't saying Jesus from this town. Nobody cared about the town. But you're going to see that in a moment. Hold on. I'm going to show you, because it doesn't even say what they say. So let's look at the scriptures. And we have a lot of scriptures, so I don't know if we're going to get through it in one video, but we'll do our best. For we have found this man a pestilent fellow, and a mover of sedition among all the Jews throughout the world, and a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. Similar to Nazareth, right? But it has E-N-E at the end, because he's part of that group. And I answereth, Who art thou, Lord? And he said unto me, I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom thou persecutest. Let's look this up, because I can't recall, but I know in almost all of these it's wrong. So wait, let me find out what is going on here first. I can't remember. Okay, so this is where Paul is making his journey, and he's after the saints, and he's after the disciples, and so Jesus is talking to him, and Jesus introduces himself. Instead of saying he's Jesus, he says he's Jesus of Nazareth. He tells the city that he was raised in, not even born in. Do you see how ridiculous that is? Okay, so let's look at Acts 22, verse 8. He says, Jesus the Nazarene. That's what he's saying. I am Jesus the Nazarene. And that's what it says in almost every case. There's a couple of exceptions, but they have to put Nazarene here because they translate it to Nazareth as though it's a town. So, hold on. Okay, so here is Jesus of Nazareth, but they have to put Nazarene here, as I said before, because when they give the city, when they say a person is, this is actually written differently, but they don't give, like this would say Jesus, a Nazarene or something like that, Ian, a resident or something like that. So in order for it to translate to Jesus of Nazareth, they had to change this to Nazarene. But it could just say he's a resident there. But he is the Nazarene. So it's the same thing. He is the one who draweth near. So either way you want to take it. Anyway, let's continue on. Okay, now this one I disagree with what the commentaries say. Let's read through this. Others said, "This is the Christ," but some said, "Shall Christ come out of Galilee?" And when we read down, the Pharisees are talking to Nicodemus here. Nicodemus saith unto them, He that came to Jesus by night, being one of them, doth our law judge any man before it hear him, and know what he doeth? They answered and said unto him, Art thou also of Galilee? Search and look, for out of Galilee arises no prophet. Now the commentaries say that Jonah came out of Galilee, but the way that this is stated, I do not believe it is. I kind of glanced at the map, and it's very close. It's too close to tell for sure. I'd have to study it to know. But first they say, shall Christ come out of Galilee? And then Nicodemus is standing right there, but he does not contradict this. They say, search for yourself and look, for out of Galilee arises no prophet. And there's no contesting of that from Nicodemus, as though it were true. Now, it wasn't essential to our study that I prove it, because we know that Jesus does start in Galilee. He takes his message all up and around and through Galilee. So it wasn't essential, but I do not believe that Jonah was a Galilean, because the Pharisees were wrong about so many different things. So you have to do your own research. But because of the way this is written, I do not believe they were wrong about this. I don't believe there was a prophet that was born in Galilee. And so I presented this because I don't believe that Jesus was part of that. The Sepphoris was part of Galilee as either. I don't believe it. Just because of the way this is written, though. You'll have to do your own research on that. I'll probably do a study later, but it'll be much later. They answered and said unto him, Art thou? Oh, we don't need that. We just did that. And he came and dwelt in a city called Nazareth, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophets, he shall be called a Nazarene. Okay, this had a lot of errors in it. So it says that Jesus returned to Nazareth, his hometown, and so that it could be spoken by the prophets, he should be called a Nazarene. Well, we know that this means priest, okay? The tricky thing about this is, first of all, you know what, let's do it like this. Let's search prophet, because we're going to use that as somebody's shooting off fireworks. We may have to pause. So here they have prophet, and let's look at the format. And they said unto him, In Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by G1223, the prophet. This word G1223 is through the prophet. Through the prophet. So let's find the next one. And it was there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken of the Lord through the prophet, saying, Out of Egypt have I called my son. So when it's spoken of the Lord through the prophet, we need to go back up to the last one. Let's find the next, because we're going to have to go back up. And I don't remember where it was. It's fulfill. Okay, verse 5. Was written by or through the prophet. Oh, this computer. I'm so sorry, you guys. It's giving me big old problems here. And they said unto him in Bethlehem in Judea, for thus it is written by... Well, okay, we're just going to skip that because it doesn't... It's in a separate sentence. But here it says it was spoken of by the Lord through the prophet, and then it tells you, quote, unquote, exactly what he said. Out of Egypt I have called my son. Okay, something wants me to pause this because there just keeps... A lot of noise keeps coming on. So hold on. Okay, so let's see if we can get through this. So the words were spoken by the Lord, and then it was spoken through the prophet, and then it gives you a quote of what the Lord said. So he says, out of Egypt I called my son. Okay, so it's a quote, but it was originally spoken by the Lord. So let's find the next one. Then was fulfilled that which was spoken by Jeremy. So they're quoting from the Bible here. Do you see the difference? It was spoken by Jeremiah, the prophet, saying, in Ramah was their voice heard. So we get down here, and it says, and he came and dwelt in the city called Nazareth, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken through the prophet. And then it doesn't give you a quote. It just says he shall be called a Nazarene. That's not a quote. It would say saying and then a direct quote, which was said by whoever originally said it. So I went ahead while I had you guys on hold, and I pulled up, I searched the word spoken here. Now, there are, just so you can see, there are other uses of the word, but when I went through all of these were used in the same manner. There's maybe one or two in the other ones that have, there's not a lot. It wasn't enough for me to justify going through all of them, but all of these are used exactly the same way. So you have, now all this was done that it might be fulfilled which was spoken of the Lord by the prophet, and then it's saying by the master through, and then it tells you exactly what he says, and the next sentence is going to be a quote. Behold, a virgin shall be with child, and that's the quote, because it tells you exactly what he said. That 3004. So we've already went through chapter 2. Let's jump down to 4. That it might be fulfilled which was spoken by Isaiah through Isaiah the prophet, saying, and then it'll tell you the quote next. 8:17. That it might be fulfilled which was spoken by Isaiah, declared through Isaiah, saying he, and then it gives you the quote. Fulfilled which was spoken by Isaiah through Isaiah, saying, and then it gives you the quote. And this is the way it is throughout the Bible. It'll tell you exactly what he said. Saying mean through G1223, through the prophet, saying, I shall, and he uses I will open my mouth. It's a direct quote. Now, does it match the Bible? I didn't check all of that. But what I did check was that it quotes it as though it was said directly from the Lord. And that is not what is done in Matthew 2:23. However, and I'll just click on these real quick. You can pause the screen and read them and check for yourself. But it's the saying here, so it's going to be through. saying, and this is by right here. So this is coming from the words of the Bible, because it's being declared by the prophet. And then you would find this quote where it's related in the Bible, but not exactly the words of Jesus. And he shall be called a Nazarene. That's not it. What? That's not said. However, here's the funny thing about this, even though this second part is not real. The person that wrote it knew exactly what a Nazarene was. He knew what it was, and he knew what it meant, because in all of the other cases he used prophet. Here he used prophets, because more than once in the Bible Jesus is called a priest. So when he wrote it correctly. He did not write it grammatically correctly, because he should have used the 2-5 the 5-2, what is it? 5259. He should have used the 5259. And then it wouldn't have been so conspicuous. But he knew what Nazarene was. The Lord has sworn and will not repent. Thou art a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. Psalms 110 verse 4 calls Jesus a priest. Even he shall build the temple of the Lord, and he shall bear the glory, and shall sit and rule upon his throne, and he shall be a priest upon his throne, and the counsel of peace shall be between them both. Zechariah 6:13 refers to Jesus as a priest. So more than one prophet, even though throughout the verses in Matthew it's prophet, 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 prophet. He used the plural, so he knew exactly what it was and what he was talking about when he wrote it. He just made an error. Philip findeth Nathanael, and saith unto him, We have found him whom... Let's see where we are. Yeah, let's stop here, and we'll pick back up in this verse and continue our study from there. All right, I will talk with you in the next video.